Hello, and thanks for stopping by. London is absolutely teeming with commemorative plaques. Green plaques, brown plaques, black plaques, red plaques, oddly shaped plaques, and of course, most notable of all, the distinctive blue plaques, of which there are over 900 in the capital, marking sites associated with notable historical figures. One such plaque, which I briefly mentioned in my recent video about London's unexpected film locations, can be spotted on the corner of Walworth Road and East Street. Installed by the Southwark Heritage Association, it informs passers-by that it was here, in April 1889, that the world's first mega movie star, Charlie Chaplin, was born. Now, although East Street is officially regarded as the place where Charlie was born, and the little tramp did indeed grow up in South London, he lived at homes on Methley Street, Brixton Road and Kennington Road, as well as spending a miserable stint in a Lambeth workhouse, there is some speculation that he wasn't born in London at all, an intriguing point which several viewers raised in the comments on the video. I have read about this rumour before. It suggests Chaplin's birth occurred in a caravan on a noted traveller's site called the Black Patch, which is located in Smethwick near Birmingham, real Peaky Blinders territory. And, to be fair, it's a theory which isn't as far-fetched as it sounds, as Charlie's mother, Hannah, did indeed have Romany blood. Charlie Chaplin died on Christmas Day in 1977, and when his widow, Una, passed away in 1991, their daughter Victoria inherited a bureau, in which she discovered the letter that had been locked away in a drawer for quite a few years. This letter had been written to Chaplin in the 1970s by an elderly gentleman named Jack Hill. Hill happened to be Hannah's maiden name, and in it, Jack stated that Chaplin had been, quote, born in a caravan that belonged to the Gypsy Queen, who was my auntie. And Jack also provided details of the West Midlands location. To add to the mystery further, no certificate recording Charlie's birth appears to exist, even to the extent that MI5, when asked for help in 1952 by the American government, who were looking into the actor's suspected communist sympathies, could find no copy. Although the question surrounding Chaplin's place of birth means this plaque is, at best, ambiguous, there are a number of other plaques in London which do indeed contain 100% proven mistakes, and in some cases, outright lies. And in this video, I'd now like to share 9 such examples with you. High up on Harrow-on-the-Hill, on the junction of Peterborough Road and Grove Road, close to which you can glimpse some spectacular views over London, you'll find this rather ominous plaque, which was unveiled in 1969. Take heed, it tells us. The first recorded motor accident in Great Britain involving the death of the driver occurred on Grove Hill on the 25th of February 1899. A car crash did indeed occur here that year. The vehicle involved was a 6-horsepower Daimler wagonette, which had been taken out for a test drive by Edwin R. Sewell and 5 passengers, all of who were employees of the Army and Navy stores. The group had set off from Whitehall and driven northwest towards Harrow, presumably as they wanted to see how well the car could handle steep hills. In the late afternoon, the party stopped at the top of Harrow-on-the-Hill for a meal, and no doubt a few drinks, at the King's Head, before clambering back into the Daimler. Minutes later, at around 6 PM, the car approached Grove Hill, hurtling along at a reckless 20 miles per hour, and as they headed into the downward slope, the vehicle's rear wheels collapsed, sending Edwin and one of the passengers, 63-year-old Major James Stanley Richer, flying out of their seats. Edwin Sewell was killed almost instantly, whilst Major Richer died in hospital 3 days later. The other passengers fared better, escaping with just a few cuts and bruises. As tragic, and indeed historic, as this incident was, it wasn't, as this tablet claims, the first to involve the death of the driver. Britain's first fatal accident involving the death of the driver had occurred almost exactly 1 year before, on the opposite side of London, when, on Saturday the 12th of February 1898, 42-year-old Brighton resident Henry Linfield was driving from Hammersmith back to the seaside resort with his son. Part of their route passed along Russell Hill Road in Purley, which, interestingly, bears a very close resemblance to Grove Hill in Harrow, as it too has a steep gradient. Here, as a news report from the Times said, something went wrong with the apparatus, and the vehicle ran onto the path. The car then smashed through a wire fence and hit an iron post, before finally crashing into a fir tree, crushing poor Henry's leg. He was rushed to Croydon Hospital where the limb was amputated, but it was of no use and he died hours later. Fortunately though, Henry's son survived unharmed. Motor car related deaths had occurred even before this. On August 31st, 1869, a woman named Mary Ward, who was travelling as a passenger in an experimental steam-powered vehicle, tumbled out of her seat and was run over and killed on Cumberland Street in County Offaly, Ireland, in what's believed to have been the very first death in the world caused by a car. Then, on the 17th of August 1896, a 44-year-old pedestrian named Bridget Driscoll was run over and killed outside the Crystal Palace Entertainment Complex in Sydenham. In this instance, it is reported that the car involved was being driven in a zigzag course. In other words, it would appear the driver was behaving like an idiot. And as one witness stated when Bridget was struck, the car had been careering along as fast as a good horse can gallop. Neither Henry Linfield or Bridget Driscoll are commemorated with a plaque. Maybe it's about time there were. Although the old London Bridge was famously sold and rebuilt in Arizona in the 1960s, a transaction which, technically, made it the world's largest antique, a few parts of the previous river crossing can still be spotted here and there, most notably this archway and adjoining stairs, which are known as Nancy Steps, the reason for which is supposedly explained by this plaque, which reads, "These steps were the scene of the murder of Nancy in Charles Dickens' novel Oliver Twist." Well, that's not quite right. When Charles Dickens wrote Oliver Twist in the late 1830s, the incarnation of London Bridge, to which these remains belonged, was brand new, having been unveiled earlier in the same decade. And they do indeed appear in the novel, namely when the odious character, Noah Claypole, who early on in the story taunts Oliver when he's an apprentice undertaker, spies on Nancy as she has a clandestine late-night meeting with Mr. Brownlow. Noah passes this information on to Fagin, and in turn, Nancy's violent partner, the thuggish Bill Sykes, catches wind of the betrayal, thus leading to her murder. The scene in which Nancy is beaten to death, arguably the most shocking passage in the book, doesn't take place at London Bridge though. Sykes commits the murder within the confines of their own home, which Dickens places in Bethnal Green. It's possible that whoever created this plaque had the 1968 musical adaptation, Oliver, in mind when writing the description. For in that version, Nancy is indeed murdered at London Bridge, shortly after which, as in the original novel, Bill Sykes attempts to flee across the warehouse rooftops of nearby Shad Thames, whilst being pursued by an angry mob. Not too far from Nancy Steps is Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, which I spoke about at some length in my previous video on Borough's Hidden Corners. I'll link that below in case you missed it. The Globe as it appears today is of course a reconstruction. It opened in the late 1990s after receiving backing from many generous financial donors, the names of who can be seen engraved in paving slabs in the theatre's courtyard. Two of the names featured, which can be seen side by side, belong to Monty Python stars John Cleese and Michael Palin, although quite glaringly, Michael's surname is misspelt. Palin should only have one L, although here there are two. Apparently this was an in-joke between the two comedians, with John Cleese saying he'd only donate money to the Globe if his friend's surname was spelt incorrectly. Right next door to the Globe is this rather lovely looking house, the address of which is 49 Bankside. As you can see here, it has a splendid view of the mighty St Paul's Cathedral, which is located on the opposite side of the Thames. And according to this ornate plaque, Sir Christopher Wren resided here whilst the cathedral was under construction, supposedly because the position of the house was ideal for keeping an eye on the project. Furthermore, the plaque goes on to claim that, in 1502, Henry VIII's first wife, Catherine of Aragon, took shelter here on her first landing in London. Unfortunately, both of these assertions are outright fibs. The house dates from around 1710, the very same year St Paul's was completed, and over 200 years before Catherine of Aragon supposedly popped her head in here. Apparently, this cheeky plaque was stuck on the building in 1945 by a former resident named Malcolm Month. Said to be something of a fantasist, Malcolm was inspired by a similar plaque once located nearby, which stated Sir Christopher Wren did indeed once own a property in the area, although it certainly wasn't this one. These next two plaques, which were recently installed at a swanky new development at numbers 17 and 18 Catford Broadway, contain outright lies, easily the most blatant ones on this list. At first glance, they look like genuine English heritage plaques, although peer closer and you'll see that they were placed here by Heritage of Catwanda, in order to honour two actors named Raven Bjorn and Catherine Ford. The thing is, the two individuals alluded to here are a complete fabrication. Raven Bjorn and Catherine Ford do not exist, and it would seem were dreamt up as a marketing gimmick to promote the property, or as a spokesperson for the architectural firm responsible claimed, quote, to draw more attention to the area's local history by connecting a memory of Catford to the new development at the town centre. Make of that what you will. The thing is, the two plaques were inspired by the fact that Catford Film Studios, which were indeed real, were based in the area for a brief spell between 1914 and 1921. Although why a plaque simply commemorating that interesting fact couldn't have been put up instead, I really don't know. What do you think? Now, technically, this next plaque doesn't contain a mistake as such, although the claim it bears is a highly controversial one, and if you happen to be American, it's most likely you will view the assertion as being a false one. Located at 62 Gloucester Place, which runs parallel to Baker Street, the plaque in question commemorates one Benedict Arnold, an important figure who fought on the American side during the War of Independence. As you can see, it's stated here on the plaque that he was, quote, an American patriot. Or was he? Although Benedict Arnold had indeed once been a highly respected Major General, and even a friend of George Washington, he completely annihilated his reputation in September 1780, when, apparently angered at having been passed over for promotion, he decided to betray his side by secretly agreeing to surrender the strategically vital West Point Fort to the British. A treacherous act for which it was agreed he'd be paid the handsome figure of £20,000, which is well over 2.5 million in today's money. Fortunately for the Americans, this act of treason was scuppered when John Andre, who had been tasked with sneaking plans of the fort across, was apprehended, with the maps being found tucked in one of his boots. John Andre was promptly executed. He now has a memorial in Westminster Abbey, although Benedict Arnold was far luckier and managed to escape by the skin of his teeth. After placing himself with the British forces, Benedict moved to London, where he made 62 Gloucester Place his home. Understandably, his betrayal had caused utter outrage in America, so much so that the nation quickly adopted the phrase Benedict Arnold as a term of insult, and even the British themselves found it hard to trust the once respected military figure. Benedict Arnold died here in June 1801 and was buried in St Mary's Church, Battersea. The sad irony with Benedict Arnold is that he had indeed once served with distinction, particularly at the Battle of Saratoga in 1777, where he was badly wounded, leaving him with an injury which took 5 months to recover from. Had he in fact died there and then, he would of course never have had the chance to betray his country, and would indeed now be considered a hero, as opposed to the wretched figure which he so infamously became. Similar to Michael Palin's paving slab inscription at the Globe Theatre, which we saw earlier, this blue plaque, which can be spotted at 35 Tavistock Street in Covent Garden, also contains a spelling error, although in this case it would appear the fault was not intentional. The plaque in question marks the former home of the author Thomas de Quincey, who in the early 1820s wrote his most famous work here, Confessions of an English Opium Eater, in which he detailed his disturbing experiences with the drug. I seemed at night to descend into chasms and sunless abysses, depths below depths, from which it seemed hopeless that I could ever reascend, he tells the reader. I sometimes seemed to have lived for 70 or 100 years in one night, nay, sometimes had feelings representative of a millennium passed in that time, or however, of a duration far beyond the limits of any human experience. Thomas de Quincey's plaque was unveiled here in 1981 by the actor Donald Sinden, and the error can be found in the surname. Thomas spelt Quincy with an E, but here it's missing. Although to be honest, considering how much opium he was knocking back, I doubt Thomas would have cared much had he been around to see it. When the plaque first appeared here in the early 80s, the building was, just like today, occupied by a restaurant. Nowadays it's called Cafe Murano, but back then it was actually called Thomas de Quincey's, and they had the spelling right, meaning the error on the plaque was immediately, and no doubt embarrassingly, apparent. Furthermore, de Quincey is also commemorated at another of his former homes, this one being on Glasgow's Renfield Street, where, again, his name is spelt correctly. When thinking about the error on the Tavistock Street plaque, I've developed a theory which I reckon may explain the error. During the period when this plaque was created, the popular American drama, Quincy, which was about a Los Angeles medical examiner, played by Jack Klugman, helping to crack crimes, was being shown on British television. In that American TV show, Quincy's name is spelt without an E, so I have a feeling that whoever laid out this lettering may well have been watching the show the night before. Please do let me know in the comments if you think my theory sounds plausible. Unlike the fictitious Raven Bjorn and Catherine Ford who we encountered earlier in Catford, one actress who was very much real was Lillie Langtry, a woman who was a huge star in her day. As well as acting, Lillie, who was born in Jersey in 1853, also went on to become a theatre producer, socialite and racehorse owner. For a time, she lived in a fancy property on Chelsea's Pont Street. The building now forms part of the Cadogan Hotel, famous for being the place where Oscar Wilde was arrested in 1895. And as you can see, Lillie's former home is now marked with a blue plaque. However, did you notice how, a moment ago, I said Lillie was born in 1853? Well, look at the plaque, and you'll see that her date of birth is given as 1852, which is incorrect. They added a whole extra year to Lillie's age. How rude. At first, this last plaque seems straightforward enough. Located at 10 Aldersgate Street, on the corner of London Wall, it commemorates St Mark's Hospital, which was founded here by Dr. Frederick Salmond in 1835. Born in the beautiful Somerset city of Bath, Dr. Salmond developed an interest in people with intestinal diseases and, there's no polite way of putting this, rectal problems, largely due to the fact that many people suffering from such ailments came to Bath in the hope that the famous hot springs there would offer a cure. Dr. Salmond eventually moved to London, where he set up a charity hospital at this very spot to provide treatments for poorer patients, although he did offer private treatment too. One of his most famous patients was Charles Dickens, who, having to sit at a desk writing for hours at a time, suffered from piles. In 1851, Dr. Salmond moved his hospital to a larger site on City Road, where it became known as St Mark's, due to the fact that it opened on the 25th of April, which is the feast day of St Mark. St Mark's remained on City Road until 1995, when it's moved to a new site at Northwick Park Hospital in Harrow, where it remains to this day. So what's incorrect about this plaque then? Well, when Dr. Salmond's first institution was located here, it wasn't known as St Mark's. As we've just seen, that name was used later for a different building. When based at this site on Aldersgate Street, it was in fact called the Infirmary for the Cure of Fistula and Other Diseases of the Rectum. So yes, in this case, I suppose you can see why the authorities decided to be economical with the truth. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this look at 9 London plaques packed with errors. I'd love to hear your thoughts on these mistakes. Which one do you think is the most awkward? And can you think of any other similar examples, whether they be in London or elsewhere? If so, please do be sure to let me know in the comments. Thank you so much to all of you who support my channel with your kind words, likes and shares. I couldn't do this without you. If you haven't yet subscribed to Rob's London, then I'd appreciate it very much if you could please consider doing so, as this, along with clicking the bell icon to receive notifications, will ensure that you don't miss out whenever I publish a new video. Plus of course it would be wonderful to have you along. If you're feeling extra generous, you can also support my work with a tip via either my Ko-fi account, which I'll link below, or the YouTube thanks button, which appears as a heart icon beneath the video. Any such financial donations are of course greatly appreciated, and they really do help go towards creating content. Anyway, on that note, thanks again for watching friends. Stay well and please be sure to stay tuned.